All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Open Publishing Fest. My name is Dan Rudmann. I am the Associate Director of Punctum Books and one of the organizers of the Open Publishing Fest. Today, we have a session to discuss the way in which libraries and librarians are collaborating with open publishers to support open science and open access publishing. We have a really great panel, a collection of people in different parts of this landscape. For example, Shira Eller, who works with Lyrasis, and Leah Richardson and Shira Eller at George Washington University Library, and Kamran Naim at CERN, and Rebecca Wojturska at University of Edinburgh. So this discussion is meant to be very informal and off the cuff. It's really to talk about what we see happening right now insofar as the collaborations between libraries and open publishers, and also what we are sort of hoping happens as these relationships develop, and what kind of needs to happen so that open access and open science becomes more of the standard way in which we conduct our research. So to begin, I'd like to kick things over to Rebecca Wojturska at University of Edinburgh.
Lovely. Thanks for inviting me along, Dan, and hello to everyone. So I'm Rebecca Wojturska, and I'm the Open Access Publishing Officer at the University of Edinburgh. I'm based in the Scholarly Communications team. So I'm just going to tell you all a little bit about myself and about the Open Access Journals hosting system that we run at the library. So a little bit about me. I have an undergraduate degree in English Studies and 2 master's degrees, one in English Literature and one in Publishing. I've worked across science, technology and medicine, as well as the arts, humanities and social sciences. So previous workplaces include the Royal Society of Chemistry and Edinburgh University Press. So I've not moved too far from Edinburgh University Press to the University of Edinburgh. So during my career, I've worked across editorial, production, marketing and development. So I just thought I'd give a little overview of the current landscape of library-led publishing, just in case people aren't familiar with it. So the Library Publishing Directory recently reported that there are 153 library publishers and hosting platforms. So this is up from 125 in 2018. So you can see there has been some steady growth there. In the UK in particular, there has recently been an influx of new university presses. So this has particularly been going on since 2015, and they include UCL Press and White Rose Press. Institutions have also been developing their own open source or paid for software to contribute to wider publishing activities. I'm thinking like Manifold and OJS, among many, many others. So overall, it is a very rich landscape with a lot of libraries getting involved in one way or another. And with an increased focus on open access, I think it's a really exciting time to be involved with library-led publishing, which leads me nicely into library-led publishing at Edinburgh. So at the library, we provide an open access journals hosting system, as I mentioned before. And it's worth saying straight away that we're not a publisher. And when we're talking about library-led publishing, we're also including hosting services and systems like the one we have. And because we're not a publisher, we don't have responsibility for peer review or production, etc. So instead, we focus on empowering and equipping academics and students with everything they need to run successful journals. And I'll go into more detail about that in a moment. But overall, we focus on hosting, support, and providing publishing expertise. It's also worth noting, I'm sure many of you know, but the University of Edinburgh already has a traditional publisher in the form of Edinburgh University Press, and the remits between the two are very different. So the service is provided free of charge to staff and students of the University of Edinburgh, and there is a very small charge for external partners, which only serves to cover the cost of running the service. There's no profit to be made, and money is fed back into providing that service. We currently have 18 student and academic-led journals, as well as 5 journals hosted on behalf of external partners. And the journals cover a really wide range of research topics, including anthropology, arts, cultural studies, medicine, religious studies, Scottish studies, social sciences. So it really is very broad. We also support societies, including the Royal Medical Society and the Society of Antiquaries of Scotland. And excitingly, one of our new journals is quite different in that it's actually from the Guide to Pharmacology database. And what is happening there is that information is being pulled out of the database and being put into the journal, which means it's citable and discoverable in a way it wasn't before. And the journal houses those citation summaries, and you can click through to the database. So it's actually pretty cool and pretty unique, and perhaps even a new direction in the way we access and share information about those databases. So just going into a little bit more detail about the service itself and what we offer. We offer use of the journal's hosting platform, OJS, as well as technical support and the preservation of content. We offer training, documentation, advice and policies, all to ensure the journals are in line with industry standards. We also offer the initial setup of pretty much everything with limited customization, just so the guys in IT don't hate us. We also offer the ISSN application and sort out the DOIs and metadata delivery. So basically all the kind of background publishing-y things that no one really likes to think about, but which is crucial to dissemination and discoverability. So as I mentioned, everything is fully open access, and we use Creative Commons licenses. We don't ask for article processing charges, so we're keeping it open both ways. You don't pay to be published, and you don't pay to access that content. And this accessibility is, I think, a very core component of inclusive publishing, which is what we're aiming for. And on top of that, we do host niche subject areas, and these areas aren't always covered by commercial publishers. And in doing so, we're providing support for early career researchers and students as well. So I just thought I'd end on a little kind of quick note of the future of the library for us. We're aiming to continue to develop the service, strategy and policies to ensure we are always compliant with industry standards, as well as funding legislation, of course. We aim to promote and grow the service so that more people are aware of A, the research they can freely access, and B, the service they can benefit from. I'm very excited to say we have 2 new journals in development. So one is Clinical Phage Therapy, and the other is Contemporary Challenges, the Global Crime, Justice and Security Journal. So watch this space. We're also going to start looking into potentially hosting monographs and textbooks, but it's very much in its infancy at the moment. And overall, we'll be seeking further opportunities for involvement in teaching and learning, with an overall aim of supporting the academic staff and students of the University of Edinburgh, but also beyond. So that's a kind of whizzed through summary of everything that we're kind of up to at the library. So thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. It's awesome to hear, such a comprehensive perspective on the way in which a library can support open access. Up next is Shira Eller at the George Washington University.
Hi, everyone. So I'm going to give sort of an overview of what we do at the Scholarly Communications team at GW Libraries, which Leah is also on, so she'll be talking about that as well. I'm the chair of the Scholarly Communications team, and you can sort of tell that we're a team rather than having one sort of specialized ScholComm librarian that was hired specifically to do that, and that's what 100% of their job is. I'm actually the art and design librarian. That's my real job, but we wear many hats at GW Libraries, and I think that's actually kind of a strength of our team, that our team is sort of based on various interests and skill sets. And so we have archivists on the team, we have instruction, collection development librarians on the team, our data librarians on the team, we have a software librarian on the team, we have our sort of copyright and licensing guy from finance on the team. So we all bring a certain skill set, but we've also learned a lot together in sort of the ScholComm landscape. And really, I would say we have tried to support content creators throughout the university in all aspects of publishing, and sort of understanding the publishing life cycle. But really one of our big goals is to build a culture of OA on the campus. And so that can be different things, whether it's like meeting with grad students of different departments and sort of trying to get in on the ground floor with them before they become professors and start publishing, and sort of having them understand what's, not that we want to use buzzwords, but like green OA, gold OA, like we have our institutional repository. Don't pay this APC because you can make it available in our IR. And we also have other groups that are working sort of in similar veins. So like we also have an open educational resources team. And obviously those goals sort of align a lot of times. But that's also obviously a big initiative that is, about making textbooks and course materials affordable. So other than those sorts of educational goals that we have across the campus, we do help with publishing open access journals on campus, sort of similar to Edinburgh, but we have sort of maybe a more scrappy operation, I would say. So like, I think sort of our team, what we can bring to this, we're not super like cutting edge. We're not MIT or UC. We're not breaking the big deals or anything, but we're sort of talking about small steps that libraries can take to get started. So like, these are the kinds of things that we're doing. So an undergraduate journal started up and we sort of reached out to them. And so now we really partner with them. Their articles are in our IR. We create DOIs for them. We've recently been helping them remediate their PDFs for accessibility, which is a big, like accessibility for the visually impaired and who are, using electronic resources or websites. And we've even done some workshops with them about like, what is peer review? How do you do it? What are best practices? So it's been a really good experience working with these students and getting them to understand. And that's obviously an OA journal. And we've also supported a grad student journal and a faculty journal as well. But again, we're not a publisher. We don't actually have a university press. So we're sort of like kind of on the grassroots a little bit with helping students and faculty with their publishing. As I mentioned, we also have an institutional repository that our team was involved in the creation and building of it. And we're sort of also maintaining it, like gathering materials for it and promoting it. But that's really what sparked us to advocate for increasing our library support for OA and OA publishers, because we see, the work involved in these systems and that it's a better investment in the long run to expand the open access landscape. So Leah's going to talk more about our work in that area. So I'll turn it over to Leah.
Okay, hi, everybody. Thanks, Shira, and thanks for this whole panel, and thanks, Dan, for organizing it. It's really an honor and great to be here today and talk about this subject. That's something that I didn't see in my library career, but here I am, and I'm really passionate about it now. And like Shira, I come from a different background. I'm a special collections public services librarian, and we wear many hats at GW, which is wonderful. And this sort of interdisciplinary, interdepartmental team came together with this charge of building a scholarly communications team and building our institutional repository and helping to build this culture of open access. And it's been really rewarding, and we've learned a lot. And I just want to reiterate what Shira said about how like we're not trying to put out there that we're like on the cutting edge and doing all the latest and greatest. And in a lot of ways, we're playing catch up, or we're just kind of like learning as we go. And I think that that's what's great about the community of open access is there are small things that you can do right now. If you believe in it and you want to do something, there's like lots of easy, low barrier points of entry. to get started to support this community. So Shira was saying that we were doing a lot with our institutional repository. And so we saw sort of like the work of infrastructure. And so as a team, we're trying to build this culture of OA. We're out there talking to faculty. We're doing workshops for grad students. We're trying to convince everyone that like, do this thing. It kind of like puts the work on the content creators. Like you should go out there and put your work in an open access place. And so we were thinking of goals that we could have, like another approach that we could take to help building this culture of open access. And so we saw collection development and working with our colleagues in the library as a really important space to have this discussion and educate each other around open access and the role of libraries and sort of shape how we specifically at GW in our libraries, in our collection development group, wanted to engage in that space. And so first as a group in SkullCom, we had these really grand dreams like, oh, maybe we can do something big and bold, like canceling a big deal. But that was a much harder sell, especially for your first foray. And so we sort of dialed it back a little and thought we could do more to encourage and do more to support open access platforms. And so we identified this as sort of a positive and sort of low risk first step that we could take. So at the George Washington University Libraries, we take a collaborative approach to many things, including collection development. And each year we decide as a group how to spend some specific funds. And we're in smaller teams on this bigger team of based on disciplines. So we have like a humanities team and a science and data team and area studies team. And so we all sort of gather ideas and then we bring them together and discuss them and make sort of group decisions. And so this year, the scholarly communications team led by Shira, who does a fantastic job, we wanted to bring this conversation. And so we brought to our colleagues this encouragement to do research and identify specific platforms that we might consider to use for collection funds to like open access platforms. And we provided criteria for like how to think about these things that are out there, right? So whether it's a preprint server or a repository or so something infrastructure or something more on the publishing spectrum, like punctum. And so we gave them sort of criteria for like what questions to ask, what disciplines does this support? Sort of the same sort of questions you ask about a database. And so this has been a really great first step. And just this year we have increased the number of things that we're supporting, and we're only hoping to grow in this area because I think it's helped shift the conversation. Because like there's a lot of work, we often talk about the work that needs to be done with faculty and departments about tenure and promotion to make open access a more, legitimize it as a space for publishing. But I think that there's still a lot of work to do in libraries, right? Like we need to talk about it, even though we're more engaged with it, I think, in some ways, but we are still talking with vendors and adding databases and paying for things year after year. And so this was a really good first step for us, I think, this year, and really like focusing and identifying specifically a goal to increase our open access support. And we love this idea of building community. And this has help build community within our organization and within the wider university. And then being here today and talking with folks who are part of this broader OA community. And so I'm really excited to hear from other people and established library program supporters and to just hear how other people see our role and what we can learn from it to take back to our jobs at GW. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Leah. I would like to now introduce Shira Eller, who I think has a really important perspective, oftentimes mediating the relationships between libraries and open access presses. So Sharla, thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thank you very much. And I apologize, I'm going to be reading, but it keeps me on track. Otherwise, I will tangent. So hello, I'm Shira Eller, strategist on the Content and Scholarly Communication Initiatives team at Lyrasis. Lyrasis, for those who don't know, it's a 501c3 nonprofit membership organization with over 1,000 members in 28 countries. It's a mission-driven organization that serves a diverse array of archive, library, and museum communities through numerous programs and services. And it was born out of a patchwork of diverse communities who have joined together in order to amplify impact. So given this context, it may make more sense to you that building communities across communities is a core strength of Lyrasis and is embedded in the work that I have the honor to do every day. So every day, I spend much of my time negotiating with vendors and publishers for the best pricing and terms for digital content. I've been trying to save time and money for our members by supporting libraries' collection development efforts. And as many of us know, this century has brought into question the role and value of collection development. The shift from collection-centered to services-centered library strategies, along with the introduction of time or money-saving conveniences such as patron-driven and evidence-based acquisition models, consortial buying, the big deal, aggregator ebook packages, subscription agents, alongside the exponential growth of open access, have raised uncertainties about what a collection librarian's and even the library's responsibility is as stewards of a local collection. And these conveniences have also established systems that separate us meaning publishers, libraries, faculty, scholars, etc. These systems foster competition rather than solidarity. They amplify a sense of scarcity and make us more risk averse. And now with the economic impacts of the pandemic, that uncertainty has skyrocketed. But I ask everyone, don't give up. I would argue that the library's role in building collections in this complex and evolving environment is now more important than ever. However, instead of focusing on services or collection development, rather the library's emphasis should be on relationships and connection development at local and global scales, whether that is acquiring content or producing. So for the last few years, I've been seeking effective ways to help smaller publishers build stronger direct relationships with libraries so that they can confidently implement sustainable, library-friendly business models, including open access. Most of the work I've been doing is with university presses. However, I've recently started dialogue with several OA native publishers. I've been attempting to inspire library and university press re-engagement through smaller projects, but there is only so much that one entity can do. It was time to scale things up and connect across the multi-stakeholder community, as I did not want to reinvent the wheel. I was thrilled when a group called Transitioning Society Publishers to Open Access, or TSPOA, were willing to start a conversation and explore the idea of engaging university presses in order to develop strategies for transitioning society content to open access, and as a bonus, facilitate stronger connections between society presses and the library community. Right around the same time, I also started having conversations with Graham Stone at JISC and Rupert Gaddy at Open Book Publishers about the COPUM project, which is a project largely led by scholar-led presses and trying to build a better infrastructure for supporting open monographs. So thus began my shared journey of connecting conversations across a multiple stakeholder community. I've had numerous joint calls with representatives from Lyrasis, TSPOA, COPUM, university presses from Europe, the UK, and the US, scholar-led presses, representatives from the library community, and more. We don't talk enough. And I'm learning this. And so we have shared and listened to all of our respective stories, honestly, just so that we can better understand each other. Our conversations only just touching the surface of model development or pilot projects. People don't relate so much to issues. We relate to each other and to our stories, but our collective goal is clear. Once we understand one another, we can identify our shared vision and work to make it a reality. So interestingly, these conversations are extended beyond the typical staff that libraries usually engage with when talking. We're having conversations with press directors, but also directors of journals, divisions, editorial, community relations staff. We're also talking to library directors, AULs, collection development librarians. Usually when we think about collaborating with multiple stakeholders in these kind of endeavors, we typically envision the heads of disparate organizations getting together to synergize. Basically, it's a horizontal amalgamation, and we erroneously think that is where change happens. What has made these particular conversations so impactful is they have been vertical in nature, up and down the org charts. And we must take into consideration that when diving into any kinds of endeavors we're talking about today, we need to hear the voices of those who are on the ground, the maintainers, in order for our endeavors to be successful and sustainable. So although all these conversations are still relatively new, I have a few significant takeaways to tell you about. One is everyone's having difficulty scaling in a sustainable fashion, largely because the funding for supporting open access projects is usually either grant-driven or one-off contributions from non-library entities and institutions where the current society journal editor is affiliated, for instance. In other words, the funding and supporting infrastructures for maintenance is temporary and unreliable for the long term. This does not bode well when scholar-led presses, university presses, and the societies with whom they partner are often undervalued by their home institutions, and even the library community whose investment and thereby connection and relationship has been diminishing year after year. If we as a library community do not wish to see small mission-driven scholarly publishers and their affiliated scholars and authors running to commercial publishers or disappearing altogether, we must increase support of the nonprofit mission-driven infrastructure that already exists through the university presses, society presses, in addition to the library publishers, scholar-led publishers, and new university presses that have emerged in recent years. So based on these conversations, I was seeing an opportunity to build a stronger, more effective connection infrastructure, and I had a community to back me up. One that will help mission-driven scholarly publishers connect directly to libraries for support when talking to authors about publishing open and dispelling common myths about open access. This infrastructure would connect libraries to programs, initiatives, and even just single monographs or journals so they can invest in a systemic way in bibliodiverse open access publishing programs. And this infrastructure would help these publishers communicate their needs and connect across the vast multi-stakeholder community. Lyrasis is in the development stage of a pilot project that's testing such an infrastructure. We're basing it off of what is called OAEX, or Open Access Exchange. It's a concept developed by Jack Hyland, and forgive me, Alexander, but Alexander Kocher and Dmitry Zatsev in their UKSG Insights article, Open Access Exchange, an Economic Model and Platform for Fundraising Open Scholarship Services. Right now, we have one entity that is acting in the pilot with their journal. It's Duke University Press, and an OA journal called Environmental Humanities. We're very excited to start this, but we're still in the planning stages. But right now, our biggest challenge is not it's not money. It sounds crazy to say whenever everybody's budgets are being cut, but right now I think the biggest challenge is fear. Fear that makes building trust and solidarity so terribly difficult right now. We must see reality through a radical connectedness for any chance of changing the status quo. It's not just having a relationship with each other that matters, but the quality of relationship, or in other words, the level of trust. Trust takes time to build, to listen, to learn, to take risk, to tell a new story. This new story can lead to solidarity. And I'm not talking about the kind of solidarity where we all put a remaining few dollars from our shrinking budgets into a hat. Through solidarity, we more clearly identify and name the systems that separate us. In the last many days, it has been humbling to realize that many of the challenges that we all face were actually due to decisions that were made in solitude rather than solidarity. And as my colleague said to me, we have met the enemy, and it is us. So by engaging in one conversation at a time with all stakeholders across and up and down these organizations, our stories are changing. Storytelling is not just a form of communication, but also a means of organizing. Every time we tell a story, we create something. We discover ourselves and each other and what we can accomplish together. Storytelling also opens the door to reimagine our reality. Reimagining and telling new stories is the only path to realize potential futures for our scholarly communication community. In this journey with TSPOA and COPM, I have engaged with many people who are willing to reimagine how to honor our missions through deep collaboration and connection development. Together, we are sharing risk of reimagining not only business models, we are reimagining our relationships with each other in order to tell new stories. We are taking the first steps to move away from a mere transactional relationship towards a more transformational one. So here's my call. We must collaboratively reimagine how we work together, fail and learn together, and invest in each other so that we can successfully navigate the tensions often found when we juxtapose values of transparency, integrity, accountability, and mission alignment. We will not have the power to change the rules that control scholarly communication unless we build the power and trust within and across our communities to reimagine the very stubborn mental model that governs how people think scholarly communication works. So, together, by shifting our energies and resources toward connection development, whether that be with another vendor, with an OA publisher, with across campus, the libraries and scholarly publishing communities can create sustainable infrastructures which support and even add value to the communities we collectively serve. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Sharla. That was really heartening, really encouraging. Before we move on, I guess now is my turn to speak. My name is Dan Rudmann again. I am the Associate Director at Punctum Books, and I wanted to talk a little bit about our efforts as an open access press, and particularly as an independent open access press, to build relationships with libraries toward better support for open scholarship. Punctum Books was founded in 2011, so we're nearly 10 years old, always with the intention and work toward being open and public and sharing knowledge broadly. Our founder, Eileen Joy, really embodies the spirit of openness in both the way that she runs the press and the way that she develops community around academia. And so Punctum Books has been, a really wonderful expression of our collective vision for what scholarship should be, how it can be collectively developed, how scholarship can sustain and nourish a community, how we can help one another with the work that we do. And over the last nearly 10 years, we have published over 300 books in mainly the humanities and social sciences. And our books are range from, what you might typically imagine as an academic book to works that blend fiction and theory, and to different media forms, to sound, to performance. Punctum Books being an independent press and being something that was born out of community has been able to take a lot of shapes and cast a very large tent around a great group of people who are scholars affiliated at universities, independent scholars, artists, people who are activists who work in the civic world. So this is all to say that Punctum is as much concerned with producing really enticing and important books as much as it is as building a community. And so as we've worked to do this, we have learned in our interactions with different people in open publishing that some of our best champions and advocates are librarians. And so a little over a year ago, Punctum Books entered into a partnership with the University of California, Santa Barbara to help bring our work to students at the University of California, Santa Barbara, to bring students in on the editorial process, but also to work with the library on developing infrastructure toward collective support of open access publishing. So with the University of California, Santa Barbara, we developed a framework for the way in which we could facilitate relationships between an independent academic press like our own and many libraries, with the hope that libraries could support an open access press by sharing the burden amongst many, many entities. And so to date, we have about 15 libraries across the US and in Europe who support us. And this is to say, we've developed this with the University of California, Santa Barbara, but also learning from our colleagues in this space, such as Open Book Publishers, Open Library of the Humanities, Lever Press. There are a lot of different entities trying to untie this knot of how we can align publishers and libraries more closely, both to toward financial support and sustainability, but also toward sharing other resources and knowledge to engender open access scholarship amongst faculty and students, to make our scholarship more public and invite people who are not necessarily affiliated with universities. And so this has been, really wonderful work, and at the press, getting to be in greater contact with libraries has been incredibly fruitful. But there's another aspect to this, which Sharla already mentioned, and a little over a year ago as well, Punctum began working with a number of independent open access presses to develop a project called COPIM, which is taking a very holistic view into the landscape of open access presses and looking for ways of developing infrastructure that supports our work. And we have 7 work projects based on discoverability, based on experimental publishing, on governance. But one of the central pillars, I guess, of our project is developing relationships amongst open access presses and libraries. And so we have been meeting regularly with people working in scholarly communications, with the technical developers, toward developing infrastructure, both technical infrastructure, but also the human networks, as Sharla also alluded to, that will help facilitate these relationships and bring all of us collective support. And this project is funded by Research England and Arcadia, and it will go on for the next 3 years. And so we're really excited to see how this goes and what we can develop collectively. And finally, so this brings us again to the issue of community, and in what we do in developing our library program, how we facilitate these relationships with our librarians is to work with them on creating culture change at their institutions. So I think, as you've heard from both Rebecca and Shira and Leah at George Washington University, there's a real need for culture change and education around what open access scholarship is. And it's really encouraging to see the way in which librarians are spearheading these education efforts and teaching. There's so many departments and so many aspects of the university in which this is very consequential. And librarians are the ones leading the charge. And so we, as an open access press, have been aligning ourselves with those librarians in order to share what we know, given our station in this landscape. So we work with open source developers like Editoria at the Cocoa Foundation, or PubPub, which is built from Knowledge Futures, organizations that are really looking at different ways in which we can conduct and also broadcast our research. And so we are, working with our library partners, for example, to demo these softwares or to teach them, how these can serve their faculty and students, because, that helps strengthen the bonds between our organization and librarians. And that's, I think, because of course, all of our work is published open access. And so when a library supports us, they don't get more exclusive access to our publications, of course, because that's available to everyone. But what we can offer to librarians and how we can support librarians reciprocally in the way that they support us is through community development. And so that's really our great hope with Punctum Books' supporting library membership program, with COPIM. And we see, as we meet more librarians, as we meet people like Sharla, we get a lot of hope for the future. I think that there are amazing people in this space, and people who are really values driven and really care about the nature of scholarship. And so that is that is what we will continue to do as an open access press. And thank you all for listening to me talk about punctum. So up next is Kamran Naim, who is the head of open science at CERN. And previously, he, I believe, worked in library spaces in California and has a lot of experience in this field as well. So thank you so much for being here, Kamran.
Dan, thank you so much. And thanks to the whole panel. Tough act to follow, but I'll do my best. You know, I talked quite a bit about my for this conference last week in a fireside chat with Kamran Nail, and so I'm going to try and not make this about me, but more about the work. So I'm very interested in open access, and particularly in models for open access that I believe are equitable and that don't create additional barriers, particularly for research communities in lower resourced countries. So, you know, one of the real honors to come and work at CERN is that I work as operations manager for the sponsoring consortium for open access publishing in particle physics, or the Scope 3 project, which is a kind of global cooperative, probably the world's largest cooperative effort in open access, where we have about 3,000 libraries from around the world who all contribute, effectively redirecting funds that they once spent on subscriptions to high energy physics journals, putting them into a collective fund where CERN negotiates with publishers and essentially underwrites the production costs of the 11 top journals in high energy physics. The real benefit to that model is that there's, you know, the journals are made completely open, so freely accessible and available to everyone. And because the consortium has underwritten them, there are no APCs to publish in those titles. So from an equity perspective, those titles are accessible to read and accessible to publish in wherever you are in the world. And that's really been kind of the motivating force behind my interest in OA. And so prior to coming to CERN, which was you know, relatively recently, just past November, I worked on my PhD at Stanford, working with a guy called John Walensky, who's the head of the Public Knowledge Project, and I also worked for a nonprofit academic publisher called Annual Reviews, where we were working also on exploring a collaborative open access model, and one that you know, typically because of the model of publishing of review journals, APC-based models just wouldn't work. So we came up with, and working with a guy called Rain Crow, we came up with a model called Subscribe to Open, where essentially the publisher uses the existing subscriber base and their spends on journals to help transition the you know, subsequent volumes of a title to being supported open access. That was interesting because it really kind of gets away from this notion that libraries need to have dedicated OA funds to support open access. What both Scope 3 does and what the Subscribe to Open model does is it takes previous subscription spends and redirects them to support open access. Now, you know, I'm not going to take too much time. I think, you know, we should all engage with one another, and definitely want to pick Sharla's brain on what I thought was a really compelling talk. But the last few months have been interesting for all of us, right? Like, we're all secluded in our homes. Here I am in my guest bedroom at, you know, almost 8 p.m. on a Thursday night, and you know, we're all, you know, trying to do our best to get through what is a major global health crisis. And you know, what we've realized, I think, is that you know, I think one of the great things was that the community really mobilized around this, right? So like, all these publishers got together and they said, okay, we're going to make all COVID-19 related research freely available. And so there's, you know, this alliance of publishers, commercial, nonprofit, everyone got together and committed to making COVID-19 research available free. In that, what they were effectively doing was acknowledging that not only is open access the best way and most efficient way at solving a global problem, it is that also that the status quo of the subscription system is suboptimal. Now, why did it take a virus reaching people's doorsteps for this change to happen, or for this recognition to happen, when people around the world have been suffering from the effects of infectious diseases or climate change? I mean, a host of problems that really we could have mobilized much quicker towards solutions for if only we had embraced the values of openness much earlier. Open access has been around for a good number of years now, and as much as it has, I think, taken hold and gained legitimacy, progress has been slow. We're at about 30 odd % of content that's published open access, so the majority of stuff is still behind a paywall. I'm very interested in seeing how we can accelerate this, and I think that the key really is in getting libraries to kind of build this community where people are willing to say, okay, well, one, we're going to divest from systems that are suboptimal and that don't work for everybody. And I have to acknowledge and congratulate the amazing work that the Unpaywall team have been doing, particularly in creating Unsub, which is helping librarians around the world evaluate the value that they're getting out of their big deals, and really considering canceling where those deals aren't really working for them. But to really start thinking about, okay, well, how do we invest in models that sustain and in an equitable way make content available for everybody. So I love this idea that Sharla had presented earlier, and I'm just kind of interested in hearing more of, particularly around this area of, we're coming to a point, particularly I think next year, where libraries are going to be feeling the financial pinch of this crisis. And what I'm really interested in finding out is, okay, well, if you're going to have a shrunken budget, are you going to spend that on your big deals, or are you going to invest in more equitable open access models that deliver value to a much larger part of the community? So back to you, Dan.
Thank you so much. Well, I think that's a really important question. Maybe it's maybe that's one to ask first to Rebecca, Shira, and Leah. What do you need, I guess, from other people in the landscape to continue on your work? You're doing so much to bring about culture change. You're doing so much to educate your institutions. How can organizations like ours, like people in positions like Sharla and Kamran, what can we do to support you? It's a tough question.
I mean, I have ideas. I don't know who wanted to jump in first, but I really liked what everyone said, and especially that last bit about this. We know what we're facing next year. It does not look good, and I will say that our scholarly communications group has been very vocal about well, now is the time. Now is the time. If we can save jobs, look at all this stuff that they made this open access. That wasn't that hard. Look, they did it. We have to just keep pushing. And if we, I'm nervous to say too much, but I would say that we don't get to make those decisions either, right? There's so many other factors. We report to associate deans and deans, and then we have a very vocal faculty. And there's always this fear of well, if we will, I think we just need this is this community thing. We need a lot of people on the same page about this from different groups. saying the same thing. And I really think that librarians, I can't help it, I'm biased. I love librarians. So I think that we know the message, like we've got the message, we just need everyone to get on board with this and we will help you, and it can be really transformative. So like Shira and I have, and I'll speak for both of us, like we don't have a lot of power, but solidarity is not always about being at the top, right? It's about bringing in all of those, and I liked what you said about like bringing in all the different levels, all the people around a unified message of let's make this work and survive through this crisis. Basically, it's my goal right now. But I'll let others weigh in.
Yeah, I mean, I would also say on that point, I think librarians and libraries are notorious for, if there's a question, looking to see what other libraries have done. And so, the UC cancellation of the Elsevier big deal, of course, like sort of sent ripples through everybody. And, in some ways people said, well, we're not UC and we like can't do that, but it sort of planted the seed. And I think it's sort of like there needs to be almost a tidal wave of people doing it, and then everyone else will do it. So yeah, I'll let other people speak.
Yeah, I think maybe my kind of position is slightly different in that I'm working on kind of like publishing related things, but also in a library. So I'm almost a little bit of both, if that makes sense. So as I mentioned before, I come from a traditional publishing background, and it's so interesting to see it on the other side of the librarian, and like hearing everything you guys are saying. It's like I'm kind of like seeing it all now quite a bit. But I think one thing I would like more support in personally is obviously with libraries, the giant budgets just aren't there. And with open access content, removing that financial barrier is just one step. Like I'm finding the harder part is getting that content out to people and getting them engaged. And I think that's the area that open access as a whole still needs to kind of develop and start looking into more. I don't know if anyone else kind of feels that way. I know a few of you mentioned you also hosted open access journals as well.
So in terms of the discoverability and reuse of open access content, that's something that I've heard voiced very often, because for a long time JSTOR did not host open access content, although that's changing. There are spaces that are emerging, like OAPN, who we've worked with closely, and Project Muse, of course. But the question of interoperability, of how all of these different initiatives can communicate with one another and communicate with university systems, is a major issue. And I think what Sharla mentioned previously about reinventing the wheel is a major issue. So we have right now in the landscape a lot of different people who are working on solutions that somewhat overlap, and there's a danger of missing one another, where we could rather collaborate and create something that's much more resilient. And so this is something that was our intention with this Open Publishing Fest as well, is to get a lot of people in the same space who are both in open access, but in open source software development and scholarly communications, and so that we can really share this knowledge, because we're only buoyed by one another. I think we've for so long been frightened about competition for scarce resources, and I think we need to toss that away as much as we can, and we need to say that this is a fiction. And we can support one another to collaboratively, so that we each, all of our organizations and projects are able to gather more resources.
Yeah, and they're all important. In order for us to maintain diversity, we all need to exist. Libraries, publishers, however you're serving, the scholars, it all needs to be represented. But the trick, as you were saying, is the empowerment. And that requires a leveling of the playing field of understanding, having the same kind of, use the same kind of vocabulary, just so that we understand each other. In the last months when I've been talking to people, I can't believe how we can be talking, we don't even understand. The pragmatics and the semantics of conversation are so complex. And so Kamran, at the end of the day, it's the hard work of one-on-one conversations. But if we're all willing to do that and not just expect, someone else is going to lower our budget is shrunk by 20%. So that means that all of our vendors need to reduce the cost by 20%. That's not the solution. In this, we have an opportunity to determine what we want to emerge at the end of this. And having the legacy of open access and all the models that have been developed, and trying to use this as a way to not only test those in a more significant, broad way, but also with a broader range of stakeholders. Libraries can't cover all the costs. Well, why should they? Where are the funders in all of this? Where are maybe the provosts, the departments? Can the higher education community shift some of their funding in order to invest in this, because it will only benefit all of us at the end of the day. I help at Lyrasis manage the Scope 3 account. And when APS came online last year, that's when I started working. And it was one-on-one conversations with several hundred people. And I learned that with some of them, I had to explain what open access was, because it was the first time they'd ever been. These were librarians, and this was the first time they'd ever been confronted. So education is important, empowerment is important. And whether that's you negotiating with a vendor, or whether that's you publishing and trying to get value proposition on your campus for what you're trying to publish and how you're trying to serve your community, it comes down to the really hard work of just talking to each other and trying to understand, and then bringing everybody in, and instead of thinking about scarcity and going off into your own corners, but recognizing that we're only better if we're all working together, and that our diversity will actually be stronger because of it.
Well, Sharla, thanks for that. I couldn't agree more. I think and also thank you for all the amazing work you do for Scope 3. I know it's a complex undertaking, but the work that Lyrasis do for us is amazing. I think so you touched on a couple of really important issues. One, I think, is vocabulary. It's interesting how just in kind of moving over to Europe a few months ago, the way that I can talk to people about open and just the kind of general understanding of it is a little different to how institutions in the US, who I think are starting to come along, following the great examples of institutions like MIT and the UC around OA, but I think that the more opportunity we have to have forums where we can, share knowledge and share expertise, and I'll echo what someone was saying earlier, that librarians are an amazing bunch. I'm so thrilled to have the opportunity to work with librarians, because I think, along with school teachers, they're like the best people in the world. But there's, I think, ultimately, we all we enter these professions because we want to add something positive to the world, and we all believe in the value of knowledge in advancing society. And I think that there's, we need to be able to leverage greater opportunities for collaboration. And so I'm really interested in your idea of the exchange. And how people can kind of buy into it or invest in it. I was wondering if you could speak a little more to how that would work on like an operational level?
Well, we're just testing it out, and the UKSG paper, again, it was a concept paper, but the idea is, you know, some have described it as like a dating site for investors and anybody who, and they call them bidders. So any of the journals or publishers who want to essentially crowdfund. It's not necessarily
Right.
something good for existing subscription spend or has a historical one, but it would be good for any kind of crowdfunding to kind of supplement, you know, if a journal, if an entity would have both, right? If they have an open model of some sort for flipping, but then they also have for new journals, something they could do. But it's also a good place perhaps for books, monographs, and supporting that as well. But the idea is you kind of take the ideas of some of the crowdfunding, GoFundMe, Reveal Digital did something similar, where you show like how much money needs to be raised for whatever campaign. You allow, it doesn't have to be libraries only in investing. It can open up to anyone who wants to invest. And it would also allow for perhaps a different business. Everybody would have control over, the publisher or the bidder would have control over of how the investment would be done, whether it's just a flat fee or multi-year or if it's tiered. And then, but the cool thing, and I've been talking to quite a few librarians about this who have been exploring this, is I wanted to have a vetting system, because it's really hard for librarians to make decisions on new content, and they have to research it. And that's why, you know, the systems like subscription agents can be so wonderful in that they show all of the, you know, you can kind of pick and choose and sort and filter, and you can, or you can pick subject areas or whatever, so that it would show you what is available for you to invest in. This would have the same thing, except it would be based on a vetting system of, they have a long-term sustainability business plan. They have their what kind of maybe tax status, if they're based in the US, if they're for-profit or nonprofit, and what does that mean for each, right? The idea of how are they reinvesting the dollars that are spent, depending on what it is. And, you know, those, how transparent are they? You know, a lot of OA publishers have been going to the trouble of revealing their business models. Maybe that's something that we expect on there, so that librarians can see it all in one place. They don't have to go and hunt down and making decisions around this. And what I want to see out of this, and what Jack Hyland and his co-authors were wanting, is this be modular, that maybe there's a US version, but there also might be an Irish version, since that's where they had developed in Ireland at IREL. And there could be a UK version, so that there are local entities that can participate in this, but they could connect. So if there is a global initiative, that you can see how it's working functionally globally, but also at the local level, and you can see who's participating. So just like with Scope 3, that puts in all of the members that participate, so you can see what your if your peer institutions are participating, it makes you feel a little safer in investing, because they are doing it too, which, you know, which I don't know if that was Leah or who had said that, but the idea, yes, that's really important to librarians, because one, it's awful to feel alone, and you can stand up for yourself and be leaders, but you also are stewards of the money you're using and the time you're using, and you don't want it to go to waste. And it helps a lot to know that at least the rest of their community is also participating. Yeah, so it's still being fleshed out. Hopefully in the fall it will be brought out, and I'm working with Rachel Sandberg at TSPOA. You know, you and I had started with these conversations, Kamran, and they have developed, but I'm hoping that will continue. And there have been some other entities that have approached us, hearing rumors about this, and so it's interesting. But the key thing is that I want to use it as a way to empower the investors, the librarians, to be able to make decisions effectively, responsibly, ethically, and along with the missions that they are trying to support at their institution. So it's easier for them to commit to it long term with administrative support.
Right.
What's really brilliant about this model as well, as you've touched on, is the aspect of transparency is sort of built in to the infrastructure that you're developing. And I think that this this element of being an open publisher is coming to the fore, that it's not just in publishing your scholarship open, but being transparent in all you do. I was just having this conversation because just today, Open Book Publishers, which is an amazing open access press, published an article outlining their costs for producing books. And this is such critical information for libraries, for other presses, so that we can share and scale the way in which we manage operations and find better ways of working. And to see this occur more, for us at Punctum Books, we've taken very seriously documenting and blogging our regular activities to provide that level of transparency and insight into our work. And it's very heartwarming, I think, to see other players in this space also do the same. And I think that's another aspect in which we, will support one another toward greater resilience. Well, we are at an hour. Let me see if there are any questions from our live stream. A lot of here's and support from the live stream. A lot of excited comments about what we were saying. But this is it's really so lovely to get to talk all together, and I hope we can continue this conversation, all of us. This is exactly, I think, the act that gets us toward what we're all envisioning. Just being in a room together or virtually, and sharing our stories and creating these narratives, as you so well put it, Sharla. Any final questions for the group before? I know this is it went so fast, but well, that's we'll continue this again. I'm Dan Rudmann from Punctum Books, and thank you so much to Shira Eller and Leah Richardson at GWU, to Rebecca Wojturska at the University of Edinburgh, to Kamran Naim at CERN, and to Sharla Lair at Lyrasis for being part of this conversation. I think there's a lot to hope for the future of open access, with this community in particular kind of driving the efforts. So thank you all so much.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.